All right, attendees are rising. We're just going to give everyone a few minutes to get in the room, and then we will zoom off and get carried away. So.
Sounds so romantic.
Right?
I know.
It's the lead
On
into
brand.
Bookstore Romance Day.
Yeah, you knew who you were talking to.
We gotta get there. Oh, speaking of, where's my tote? So I'll probably give it just another 30 seconds or so as I watch our number rise. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Super evening for some people. All right. Well, we seem to have reached our first stasis for the evening. So thank you so much for joining us tonight for Books in Common for our live virtual event with Gateways to Romance. We have with us tonight Andie J Christopher, Rosie Danan, Jayci Lee, Tif Marcelo, and Sarah Smith. I'm Jessica, the event coordinator at Country Bookshelf in Bozeman, Montana, and we are delighted to be here in this virtual space with our partners Paulina Springs Books in Sisters, Oregon, and Madison Books in Seattle. Andie is a USA Today bestselling author writing edgy, funny, sexy, contemporary romance featuring heat, humor, and dirty talking heroes that make readers sweat. She grew up in a family of voracious readers and picked up her first Harlequin novel at age 12 when she had finished reading everything else in her grandmother's home. Rosie writes steamy, big-hearted books about the trials and triumphs of modern love. Jayci writes poignant, sexy, and laugh-out-loud romance every free second she can scavenge. Tif is a veteran Army nurse and holds a Bachelor of Science in Nursing and Master's in Public Health Administration. She believes and writes about the strength of families, the endurance of friendship, heartfelt romances, and is inspired daily by her own military hero husband and 4 children. Sarah is a copywriter turned author who wants to make the world a lovelier place, one kissing story at a time, which is a motto I can get behind. Her love of romance began when she was 8, and she discovered her auntie's stash of romance novels. Before we hear more from this amazing panel, we wanted to point out a few things about this virtual space. First, there will be a link in the chat so you can pick your favorite sponsoring store to buy your books and show your support for all these wonderful voices. It'll continue to pop up in the chat over the course of the evening, so click early and often. We are recording this event and it will be viewable through Zoom and on YouTube after the event concludes. If you have to leave early or if for some reason you get kicked out, you can also find us on YouTube. We are streaming. So if you have questions for the authors during the course of the event, just click the Ask a Question button, which is part of your attendee bar. So it'll either be at the top or the bottom, depending on what device you have joined us with tonight. You can also see the questions other folks have asked and even vote on which questions you think would be the most fun to answer. You can also leave questions in the chat window to the right, or it'll pop up again, depending on which device you're using. If you run into any tech issues along the way, we recommend you first exit and re-enter the meeting or webinar, or you can try refreshing your browser, depending again on how you've joined us tonight. We also recommend trying headphones to fix any sound issues. We do want to remind you that this is a shared creative space that we want to remain safe for everyone and ask that you be respectful of everyone who has joined us tonight. Offensive comments or questions will see the user dismissed from this space. Now that you've been introduced, we hope you check out more great virtual programming this Saturday, August 15th for Bookstore Romance Day, a day designed to give independent bookstores an opportunity to celebrate romance fiction, its books, readers, and writers, and to strengthen the relationship between bookstores and the romance community. For more information and the full schedule of those events, check out bookstoreromanceday.org, bookstoreromanceday.org. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to these wonderful authors to share their gateways to romance and see how they started both reading and writing in the genre. Take it away, guys.
Who's gonna jump in first?
Yeah, go first. Yeah.
I know, it's like everyone's being really polite. I started reading romance when I was 13, and I picked up my first Harlequin. And I think since then, until I graduated high school, I read every single Harlequin romance I could find at my local library. I would grab 10 books at a time and stuff them into a little swim bag thing I have, and 10 was the limit. So that I would read it in like a week and come back, and my summer days and nights were filled with romance as long as I can remember. So it's really amazing for me to now be a Harlequin author myself. I just debuted this year as a Harlequin Desire author. Let me show you a picture.
I love your covers.
Thank you so much. And this one is coming out September 1st.
So
I love this. I mean, how are these people so ridiculously good looking? So,
Yeah,
I mean, it's
they're so hot.
I know.
Really attractive.
When I get my covers, I literally stare at them. I can't stop staring at them, and I keep going back to them over the course of the day. It's like, focus on editing, right? And I'm like, no, go look at the hot guy. But yes, Harlequin was my gateway and my debut. But I also write rom-coms that are funny and silly, and I couldn't help it. There's angst. It's rom-com with angst. Just go with it. But I think for my recommendation is Harlequin's a great way to dip your toe into romance, and I think rom-coms are too, because it's just so fun and enjoyable. So I'll let you guys take your turn now.
Yeah, so similar to Jayci, in my bio, my first romance was a Harlequin romance that I found like in a grocery bag in one of the closets at my grandmother's house. And like it was like, they're like Pringles, like once you pop, you can't stop. And so I would like her friend Karen, a good Karen, was a subscriber to like all of the Harlequin series. And so like she would just drop bags and bags of them at my grandmother's house, and I would pick them up. And then when I wasn't, going out to their house, I would go to the library and, similar to Jayci, just like clean off the, mostly like, I think my favorites were like Temptations, and that was like before Blaze, and Desires, because those had more kissing and like more sex scenes. So that was like where my head was at as a teenager. But then like my whole family read romance. And so my mom had books by Joanna Lindsay that are like really problematic looking back now, but like I loved them. And there was one particular author, like no one talks about her as like one of like the this sort of like original like old school romance authors. And it was Connie Mason, and her books were like beyond filthy. Like they were they were like extreme. Like Joanna Lindsay had this one book with like sex on a horse. Connie Mason would be like sex on a horse walking backwards. It was wild. And so like to start now, like there's so many places to start. Like you could, like I usually tell people like whatever sort of subgenre of fiction they like has a corresponding romance. So if you like historical fiction from any era, there's probably romance from that era. If you like fantasy, there's fantasy romance. If you like mystery, there's like romantic suspense. And I feel like even like cozy mysteries can sometimes be like the backdoor gateway into romance, depending on which authors you're reading. So I usually try to find out like what people like to read and then tell them, all right, I think I know that, like, even if I haven't read the author, I can say, well, I know this person writes, historical romance about Black Americans in, you know, the 19th century, or like I can always like I can always find one. I've always heard of one. And if I haven't heard of one, like I have, you know, friends who are a text away who can tell me about one. So who's going next? I want to hear everyone's romance origin stories.
I know.
Okay, so I'll go. So my gateway was YA romance, and YA in general. So I remember picking up my first romance like in 4th grade, and that was a Jude Devereaux book, and it was The Maiden. I don't remember like everything in that book, but I do remember being like scandalized but liking it. And then like, you know how my reading just kind of skewed left and right and all that, and Twilight came into the picture, and then I jumped right into YA. It was like, and I read like every YA I could get my hands on in the library, and then my husband deployed, and then I found Colleen Hoover, and that was it. I was in new adult, you know. Then it was like Colleen Hoover and Jennifer Armentrout and Elle Kennedy and Tamara Weber and all these indie folks that just had so many books, and like Mia Sheridan that was accessible through my, you know, whatever, my phone or my Kindle. And I just read that until I came into Romancelandia. So my writing has also done that curve. So I wrote YA and I queried YA in the beginning. And then when I fell right into like after new adult, and then I fell into adult romance, I was like, where are we? This is great. So I'm a new reader. So I've only been reading for about a decade, maybe 11 years, 10 or 11 years. But I have just been, so everybody to me is like amazing. And I feel like I'm pretty lucky because there's so much good stuff out there that, you know, I feel pretty lucky as a reader to be able to pick up whatever I can think of want to read, like I can read it.
So Sarah,
Actually-
8 years old.
Oh, so yes, that's actually, I was going to say, Andie, it's similar, like my origin story is similar to yours because I was digging through my aunt was living with us at the time, and she had a whole bunch in, she'd stored some of her stuff in my walk-in closet in my bedroom. And I was just 8 years old, just like, oh, I wonder what this is. And then that like, and I don't even remember what the name of what the title of the book was or who the author was. It was just, you know, guy with his chest all muscly open, woman in a dress, and she's like hanging off of him, and he's got that luscious hair. And as like an 8-year-old, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so like I knew I wasn't supposed to be reading it, but like I couldn't not read it. It was so intriguing and enticing. So that's what I did for a lot of my childhood, just sneaking in the walk-in closet and stealing romance books that I don't remember the title names of because I knew I wasn't supposed to be reading it because I knew I'd get in trouble. So I feel like I repressed that information inside of me. And then I was so off and on about it for like, since I was a kid through like middle school through high school, because people, at least people around me were very like, oh, romance is like lowbrow. You don't want to read that. You should be reading this, this, and this, which is super annoying. And I don't care if people think that now anyway, because romance is amazing. So then I started reading like in high school, like Jane Austen, like Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion and all like that old school romance, which is like, it's definitely not the same kind of romance that I read now, but like I feel like Jane Austen is amazing. And like there's tropes in her books that still thrive even today. And then I started getting into like reading rom-com books by Gemma Burgess, who writes, or she used to write British contemporary rom-com novels, and she's a screenwriter now. So that's kind of how I eventually got to where I am now. That just kind of, I started reading her a handful of years ago, and that just kind of reignited my love for it. And I'm like, oh, that's how this is the kind of stuff I should be writing. So yeah. So, and Rosie, you're in London now. So because Gemma Burgess used to live in London, and like write her books and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't realize until I moved here that romance as a genre is like a little bit more of an American thing, and that like here in London, it's more of a sort of like chick lit hybrid. Like if you go into a bookstore and you ask for like a romance genre, which can be not super easy in America too, because sometimes you'll still meet one of those bookstores or booksellers that unfortunately doesn't embrace romance the way a lot of them have. But here they're just like, I have no idea what you're talking about, which I learned, the hard way. So yeah, it's definitely, there's some difference across the pond. But there's also some really great British authors. And I think British authors have that like really sharp, like witty humor. Like Talia Hibbert is like the personification of that for me, probably. My gateway, it's kind of similar to Tif's, I think, in that I started in YA probably like as the demographic of like a YA character, right? Like when I was in my early teens or whatever. And I just have so many like very visceral memories of going into the bookstore, and like YA and romance, at least in my bookstore, were like kind of near each other. But I knew that like you didn't go over into the romance section because that was like grown-up books, which is like funny in hindsight. And so I kind of warmed up in YA, and I was in a lot of serials. Like I think actually somebody who was like a catalyst for me like moving into more like regular fiction, or I think what would now kind of be called rom-coms, but was probably called chick lit at the time, was Meg Cabot, right? Because Meg Cabot had written The Princess Diaries, which was accessible as a YA, and then also had adult books. And so I kind of like followed Meg Cabot over into the general fiction section. And then I distinctly remember I would just look for the books that had pink spines or like pink covers, because you kind of knew like, okay, there's probably like a love story in that one because it's being marketed with like a very traditionally feminine color, which is like kind of a special place in my heart now because my book has a pink cover. And I think like I would have maybe, it wasn't necessarily like what I expected, but now to me it is sort of like a beacon that like this is going to be like a love story and something. And I kind of says what it does, what it says on the tin. That's what all my British coworkers are saying, and get that catchphrase. So yeah, I think becoming a genre reader wasn't something that happened for me until a little bit later, when romance was kind of going through its, I'm going to say a little bit of like a rebrand. Like to me, there was a very distinct moment where romance authors started really vocalizing sort of like social values, like this is work that is feminist, this is work that is like accessible and driving social narratives forward. And that was like a big invitation to me because it was a set of values that I felt really positive, aligning with my identity, versus the sort of stereotypical romance, which I still carried a lot of that shame with me initially. And I didn't want to like let everyone know that I was like carrying a bunch of romance books. Whereas now that to me is like almost like an act of rebellion. And I feel really great about doing that.
Well, everyone, don't forget you can use the Q&A section to ask questions of our authors. But I'm curious for each of you, if you like you grew up reading it, did you, when you were like, I'm going to be a writer, did you set out to be a romance writer, or did you start somewhere else and turn to the happy ending? And what was that story like for you?
I actually wrote a screenplay before I wrote a romance novel. It was a rom-com though, so it had a happy ending. But yeah, I never thought about writing any other genre of book, like ever. I think, shortly after I read my first Harlequin romance novel, I started like writing, little bits of stories. And like, I didn't actually sit down and finish a book until I was, until like 2014. But that was always going to be a romance. So yeah, I never thought about writing any other kind of book. I think that what I loved reading the most, and I actually think in like 2012 through 2013, I had like really sort of re-immersed myself into romance because everyone was talking about 50 Shades of Grey. And, you know, whatever you'll say about the book, like it really did bring a lot of people into the genre. And I started reading a lot of like smart, really authors who were writing like super sexy books, like Lauren Dane and Kara McKenna and Charlotte Stein. And so I was like, oh, I could write romance novels about women who are more like me than some of the books I was reading when I was a teenager. So
yeah, I definitely like never wanted to write anything but romance because I realized that in any narrative I was always looking for the romance. Like it could be like the back of the cereal box and I was like, who has a crush? Like and so I think like in movies, like even if I read like a mystery or something, like I'm always brought in by the romantic elements. It's just always been like what's captivated me, like what I get excited about. And I think and Andie, you were kind of pointing this out, there's so much breadth within the romance genre, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, you're never going to get bored. Like if you get tired of contemporary, like try out paranormal, like there's just always so many stories to find within the genre and so many stories to tell within the genre. Like, I don't know, even though that my debut and the follow-up are both contemporary, I don't know that I'll always write contemporary. I think especially right now, there's sort of a lot of temptation to write like paranormal. We're seeing a resurgence because I think people want to escape a little bit. So I'd love to eventually like dip my toe in other subgenres, but romance definitely has my full heart.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have like my like if I'm in the mood for historical, like I store some up on my TBR that I know I'm gonna love. Like I can't help but read like a Sarah McLean as soon as I get that, but like if I have like you know, I can save up a couple of Sophie Jordans, but even those aren't lasting very long for right now. So
like Andie and Rosie said, I think romance was the genre for me too. I mean, I started dreaming of becoming a writer after reading Harlequin. So anything I read though, I mean, I was a voracious reader and I read across all genres and literary and everything I could get my hands on. And my focus was always on the romantic aspects. I would literally skip maybe some important parts to get to the couple, something happening to the couple. But what I found frustrating was sometimes the couple didn't get together or it wasn't satisfying enough. It was kind of like, oh, kind of together-ish, you know? I'm like, not acceptable. So I wanted to write contemporary romance and I started writing that and found the subgenre of romantic comedy because I'm just goofy. It comes out in my writing and I can't help it. But I also, I mean, there's a lot of genres I want to write, but subgenres of romance, like Rosie said. I am working on a paranormal romance right now that I'm totally in love with. And sometimes like anything, maybe even YA someday, I mean, but it has to be romance. There needs to be romance at the end, you know? Everything I write is gonna be whatever romance.
Yeah, I find like whenever I'm watching something or reading something that I know like it is not a guaranteed HEA, like I'm always like braced for it. Like whenever I'm like watching a TV show that has like a really good love story, I'm like, oh God, boys created this show. They're not gonna let them end up together.
I have like a whole set of movies that I stop and I know like this is the distinct stopping point where like, okay, if you stop the movie now, it's basically a romance because it's before the couple like breaks up or like before someone dies or like whatever. And it's a really effective coping strategy. Like James Bond, I love the Casino Royale. And I can tell you like almost the minute like where I stop it, so that it's like, and they end up happily ever after in like an Italian villa. Like,
Oh, I like that.
right. It's a really good strategy for the pandemic. So
I've done that before.
I watched the first 3 seasons of Sons of Anarchy. That's like, I like in my head, it ends after like season 3.
It's like a full circle here because I have a 14-year-old girl, 15. I mean, she just turned 15. She'll hate it if she hears me tell her 14. But she just had a movie watch with her friend, and they watched The Notebook. And I wasn't able to warn her, right, that it is not a romance. So the next day, she's so traumatized. She's like, Mom, they died. And I'm like, yes, they did. I am so sorry. Like I did not realize they were going to watch, and I did not have the chance, but how important it is to have that happily ever after. Like for me, to me, that's the criteria in whatever subgenre I write in. So even in romantic fiction and contemporary fiction with romance, like that even bleeds into like the non-romantic relationships. So not only are the romantic relationships a happily ever after, but like the friends that are fighting, like they have to get together. And I've had comments where folks are like, it just feels like it's all tied up in a bow. And I'm like,
Yeah.
You're like, you're welcome.
That's the point.
Yeah, or like, you know, if it's a mom and daughter, like, yes, they'll have their own little romances, but then that the mom and daughter, they will make up and they will reconcile, like, because I cannot like walk away knowing that they're not okay. But you know, that is like the criteria for me that has to go over. But YA romance like is like one of my favorite genres to read, because it's so fresh, you know, and it's so like, I mean, all romance is emotional, but YA and like thinking back to, you know, when you're like 16 or 17 and that first love, you're like, please. And in your mind, you're like, okay, you have like another like 50 years you're going to live, or, and you're going to be with like all these other people, but you're just, for that moment, you're like, okay, it's the both of you forever and ever. You know.
That's for me, YA romance is, I'm like, are they gonna, you know, they're 16, are they gonna stay together forever and ever? I'm like, I don't feel reassured that they will, you know, really have that HEA.
Well, it's an HFN, so
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it's like, and
but
at
I'm
the
like
time,
hoping they have kids and grandchildren together.
Because we're looking at it like as a parent, we're like, no, you will not.
Oh, not at 16.
No.
Oh Lord, no.
But I remember being 18 and being super like, this is it. Well, I was very naive, like boy crazy, 16, 17, 18-year-old. So I just thought everybody was gonna, you know, like every boyfriend, I was like, this is it. My mom's like, oh my God.
I mean, my cousin / best friend, she met her now husband, who she has 3 girls with, when she was 14 years old. So I don't ever discount it.
That's true.
That's right. That's right.
And I feel like even if like they don't, you know, you're 14 or whatever, like you can live your life and then you can come back to each other. That can be like a second chance romance.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
That is part of my
favorite.
It's such a part of my id. Like I want to write that in so many books.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm like, can it be like a second chance romance with like childhood best friends?
Oh
yeah.
Or childhood enemies, like second enemies to love.
Everybody walks away with like an idea tonight. We like
right now. We have time to talk about like our favorite tropes, because that's like my favorite thing to talk about.
That was going to be one of my questions.
Oh, am I screwing up your schedule of events?
This is not a cruise. There's no timetable. But yeah, I was curious several of you have mentioned wanting to play in other subgenres, but are there tropes that you haven't gotten to play around with yet that you would be really excited to play with, or that you're like, auto buy or auto checkout from the library?
Secret Baby.
Thank you, Andie. Thank you.
I love the
Thank you. Okay, so there was another panel like 2 days ago where they took a poll. I think it was with oh my gosh, I forgot. Anyway, and then they took a poll saying, would you rather write or would you rather read Insta Love or Secret Baby? And I put Secret Baby right away, and then I was like 20%, one of the 20%, and I'm like, oh, there's not a lot of people that want to write or read Secret Baby, I guess. But
I mean, I also love Insta Love.
yeah, me same.
These are contentious.
Yeah.
I feel like you guys are owning these.
Someone in the comments is saying fake dating.
I
love
that.
Rosie.
So yeah, my Not the Girl You Marry is my ode to the fake dating trope. Yes, it's sort of a updated version of How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. That trope, which is my favorite. And it's contentious because some people don't like it when the main characters are lying to each other. But I kind of like that because in most romances, the characters are lying to themselves anyway. Why not just add that extra degree of difficulty that they're also lying to each other?
And I do think real people lie to one another. I don't
all the time.
It's like the expectation for characters to act correctly is like immense. But like I remember like not being able to tell somebody how I feel because like that was just too much, you know?
Right?
So
right?
yeah.
I mean, I just love like I love I will preach the gospel of writing about messy bitches who love drama as main romance characters on every panel until there are no panels anymore. But like but yeah, I love
Andie, you
messy.
froze a little.
Did I freeze? Am I here?
You were fine for me.
Oh,
okay,
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
I want to write enemies to lovers, but my problem is that I am one of those people that's like, they can't just like dislike each other. They can't just like be annoyed. Like I want them to be mortal enemies pretty much.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty hardcore about how far they have to come from like really hating each other's guts. And I have thought about that because I've written a lot of like cinnamon roll heroes. Like my first book and my second book, I would say they're like very firmly like sweet. I call them like my cashmere boys sometimes. Like these are soft guys. And I was thinking about that. I was like, wonder why. And I just like am not interested, I think, since 2016 in particular, in reading about men being unkind to women. I just like have had a hard time with that. And I think with enemies to lovers, like you have to behave badly a little bit. And so I don't know, I'm hoping that there's going to be like a time in the future where there's a way for me to balance that, like people who can hurt each other but still come back from it, because yeah, I just have not been in the mood personally for like redeeming characters who have hurt their love interest. So
I think that's so interesting. Like, I think I read I started reading a very, very popular new adult book. And I was like riveted for like the first part that was like a flashback to their past when they were being crappy to each other. But then when it fast forwarded into like the present day and he was still such a jerk that I was like, I can't.
mm-hmm.
And it was such a good book that I wanted to finish it, but I was like, not right now. Like, check back again in 6 months. See how I feel then.
Yeah. I love reading enemies to lovers. If people ask me what's your favorite trope to read, I would say enemies to lovers. But enemies to lovers is probably a trope that I'm most afraid to write because I don't like it when people are mean to each other. Fights and all of that just gives me anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But the writers that I've read do it so well that it's not nasty. It's just kind of, it's funny. I could laugh at them and like, haha, and it feels fine. It's not like, oh my gosh, they're gonna like hate each other or something. So yeah, I think it's definitely the balance. But my favorite trope, and I've written this one, is brother's best friend, because I have a brother who's 4 years older than me, and growing up I always just like fantasize about, what if I get together with him, what if I get together with him. And I think my brother was very against that. Like, he wouldn't ever take me with him when he went out with his friends, even if I was invited. He's like, no.
I really wanted an older brother. Like, my friends with older brothers, they knew all of the older boys. They at least knew them, so that they could like isolate them from the pack. Like, maybe, something could happen.
And you're like, they're gazelle and I'm a tiger.
Basically, they are, like, in the words of my new favorite fictional character, Beth Dutton from Yellowstone, they are the trailer park. I am the tornado.
Oh, I love that. That's so good.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I feel like my brother was so like intent on keeping me away from his friends because I'm thinking his friends thought I was cute,
Right.
I was just
gonna say that, like, that protective older brother, like, that's I would also, Jayci, like to write a brother's best friend trope at some point. I think that would be really fun. I also think it would be kind of fun to do like maybe like a little brother's best friend, but everyone is of age. So like where the woman is like older and like she gets a hot young guy kind of romance, but everyone is of legal age. Obviously, nobody is. It's not gross.
And maybe it's the brother trying to protect the best friend from the sister.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that.
Okay, write that.
Okay, yeah.
There you go.
I love flipping tropes. That's like one of my favorite things. Like where you just take something a little bit unexpected and breathes like so much freshness and life. That's like probably one of my kind of core things. Like, I have a couple archetypes in the roommate that I try to just like destroy, basically. Like, the hero's ex-girlfriend is like probably one of my favorite characters in the roommate. And then there's like a boy next door, and I just turn him into like the worst kind of jerk. And that's been really fun too. So I am totally for like the younger brother spin on that. I think that'd be really fun.
Yeah, I also feel like in the roommate, one thing that I enjoy that you see sometimes in romance, but it's always very notable, is having like the male character having a male character be a sex worker as opposed to like a female character be a sex worker. And I think that's always like a thing I like to see in romance novels. Like, there's this book by Kara McKenna. It's actually a collection of short stories called Curio, and it's a 27-year-old virgin hires a Parisian male sex worker, and it's one of my favorite books. And until you were talking about like flipping it, I didn't realize. I'm like, oh, that's like one of the many reasons I thought The Roommate was so great, is because you were flipping that.
For me, I'm working on a manuscript where I just finished it and it's rough and, whatever. But the one thing... We
know this feeling. We get it.
Totally understand.
Yeah.
But one thing I like about it is that the heroine was the one who did the heartbreaking. And she was the one that had to grovel. She had to do the grand gesture. And you know how usually when we write heroes and heroines, the heroine usually is the smarter one and figures out everything first, right? And the guy's like 2 days too late. But this time I had the guy figure things out first, and the woman be clueless. And I guess that's kind of a flip, I was just thinking, it just occurred to me. So
Yeah,
that's
I like
definitely
it.
a flip.
Oh, I like it when the woman or the female character, she does the heartbreaking. She's not just the one like just sitting there crying because the guy she liked wronged her, and she just has to wait till he makes it better. Like, it's kind of nice to see like she can break some hearts too, but she can also acknowledge like, okay, yeah, I messed up and I'm sorry and I'll be good to you now. Yeah, like or yeah.
I think that brings up kind of like the like unlikable female character thing, which I feel like would be good.
Female
right? Like, because I think for so long, and I think, and I'd be curious to know the people in the comment section what you think too. Like, readers, it feels like sometimes hold the heroine to higher standards. Like, they're like, oh, she's so annoying, and like you're like, wait, that she's just like acting like relatively normally, or like I'll be like, I see my own behavior in that. Like, no, I'm very stressed. But I think that what you're talking about, where it's like the heroine has to grovel, is a reflection of a little bit more leniency to make mistakes, or as Andie was saying, like be really like messy. And I just like love that. I want like more room for different characters to mess up, right? It doesn't always have to be the same kind of framework of the guy not wanting commitment or whatever. There's a lot of, I think, tropes that led to that disagreement previously, and now there's so many ways to hurt each other. Let's all just like open up the aperture on it.
All my ladies are dirtbags.
And it's a reflection of like, I think how we're very hard on ourselves, perhaps, or the idea of perfection and what that means to a woman versus what perfection we expect from men. But I find myself having to tell myself, like, stop trying to edit this unlikable heroine. You know, stop trying to edit her so she's doing or saying the right thing, because it's not really being true to who I am as a woman who have, and I've made a lot of mistakes and I'll continue to do so, you know, that we can't allow them to make that mistake and then to apologize, like really understand that they're wrong and just take the brunt of whatever that means, whatever, you know, anger from other people or what else. But yeah, I agree. It's, we can't make
all my ladies are dirtbags.
Yeah.
All my ladies are dirtbags. And like, they always start out like, just sort of like not right.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's important to tell the truth, even in romance novels, even though they're going to end up happy. I just think it's just super important to tell the truth about like how people are and how people fail, because for me, when I don't see when I don't see all of the characters in a romance grow, I don't like believe the happy ending. Like, it leads me to believe a happy ending more if like neither character is truly perfect. And I just don't think there are enough like just heroines who are kind of assholes, but you root for them because they're real people.
Yeah, I don't, and I honestly, it's really nice and refreshing to see a female character who just doesn't take crap all day, every day. Like, she stands up for herself. She's real. She makes mistakes. She's mean to some people who deserve a little bit of meanness. And yeah, I like that. And it always annoys me when people use unlikable female character, because that is just, like Tif was saying, that just, I think, goes back to the kind of expectations that women are having to deal with and that are placed on them. And I don't know, I feel like a guy just has to like show up and not expose his penis, and like he's considered just like, oh my God, this guy, can you believe, like, I'm gonna marry it. Like, it's so disgusting to me, like how low the bar is for men and male characters.
He can expose his penis, but
I was just gonna say, it depends on the situation, right?
That's true. If it's appropriate, it's fine. But like, sometimes it's not.
Yeah, he just has to keep his pants on outside of the house. Yeah.
Introductions first.
Yeah.
Some kind of introduction.
I think that's one of the things that has always drawn me to romance is that it is kind of radical in sort of this rooted nature of centering women's stories by women for women, letting women have physical pleasure and those kinds of things. And so I think it's important that we have unlikable female characters, because I feel like it's important to acknowledge that we're complex. Like, all people are complex, and it's not necessarily a judgment, because like Tif was saying, we all make mistakes. And I feel like the joy of a romance novel is also learning how to apologize and take responsibility for your actions, which is hard to do sometimes.
I think the world needs accountability. Like, it needs to see like accountability on an interpersonal level models before, like, I think it can be sort of universally sort of acceptable to be held accountable and forgiven and to move on. I don't think that there is enough of that in popular culture. And I think romance can be like, sometimes when you don't believe the grovel and the grand gesture, and it's not adequate, but I think romance novels are a good place to look for, like, what is adequate accountability for your actions.
I think just talking about the grovel is actually like such a good part of the genre that I personally don't talk about as much as I could, in terms of giving us models for like apologizing for bad behavior. Like, a lot of media outside of romance, I think, you know, people do just get away with bad stuff, or it gets like written off. And I love that we're in our work, a lot of the times, like, we're teaching people how to take accountability for what they've done, and help heal relationships with people that they've wronged. And it doesn't always have to be you know, in a romantic relationship. Like, I think a lot of grovel scenes can actually expand into just, you know, apologizing to friends or family and stuff, and that's like kind of lovely.
Yeah, I mean, I just finished a draft of the third book, sort of in the not the girl you marry, not that kind of guy arc. So I finished a book involving the hero is a Catholic priest, and like the grand gesture really involves like the whole community. And it, you know, sort of him like taking responsibility for like, he doesn't do anything like really bad, but like in the big picture of things, but him taking responsibility for, you know, not really being where he's supposed to be. So I think it's one of the things that appeals to my id is like a big sort of community, like, you know, I've wronged myself, I've wronged my love interest, and therefore we've wronged everyone. And I think that's like the one thing that I really love about like Hallmark Christmas movies, is sometimes like that like part of the story involves like an entire community.
Well, to take us in a completely different direction from tropes, Melissa is curious if you have favorite romance covers. Illustrated, couples, old school with step backs, clinch cover. I told Jayci I wasn't going to quiz her on it, and then someone else did. So this isn't me, Melissa.
Melissa.
Yes. Can I just say yes? Like all
Yes
of the
to all.
above? Yeah.
I feel like all of you have jumped on the illustrated cover bandwagon. There's Jayci's Sweet Mess, and Sarah's Baker. The new one from Andie.
Yes.
And of course, The Key to Happily Ever After, which I feel like was on a list of best illustrated covers.
I love that cover. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Gorgeous.
I mean, Harlequin is doing such a magnificent job, like with Jayci's cover, Naima's cover. just beautiful people with connection, like you feel like that love. And as well as Mona Schroff's covers are gorgeous. I think that for those covers that, you know, they take the time to pick out the right folks and they take great pictures, it's just magnificent, you know. But I love all of them. I love the step back covers, I just have to say. It like gets me in the mood, you know, when you see that step back cover. You're like,
Yeah.
Like that glorious, like, you know, like angel.
Well, I also appreciate that they have faces.
Yeah.
And like, because I feel like, especially in YA, but often in like historical fiction and that kind of thing, it's like,
It's the back.
just like a silhouette, like a woman from behind, or just like legs or something. And I'm like, no, like, this is about connection. This is about two people, you know, meeting each other. So I appreciate that they aren't completely anonymous.
Yeah, I just think they have to fit the visual language of the book. Like the
Agreed.
So like if you're writing a rom-com, I think it fits to have an illustrated cover. Or if you're writing sort of something that could be fairly categorized as chick lit, I think it makes sense. For me, I felt like it made sense because that was, you know, where my publisher wanted to go. And I was like, you know, that it fit in with other books that were having illustrated covers. So I had some, you know, some clinch covers with a previous publisher, and I love those too. So I just love, like I love a badass paranormal cover with like a heroine with a sword and like leather pants, like that, you know, that's going to tell me something too. So it just has to fit, like the visual language of the cover just has to fit with the story for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the illustrated covers for the rom-com subgenre is getting across the mood of the book. You know, mine actually doesn't completely make sense because they're standing in a giant bun cake. But, you know, it's about the mood.
Yeah.
Like the
Bake a
the bun
chance on
cake.
love.
Yes, bake a
Bake
chance on love. And the chocolate bun cake looms big in the story. You know, that's what drives everything and is the reason for everything that happens. So it's really about the mood of the book, what you can respect, what you're digging into, something an escape, something sweet, you know. I think it does that job well. And then as for the Harlequin Desire covers and other Harlequin covers, that speaks to the mood as well. Harlequin Desire is about glamour and drama. So these characters just looking into each other's eyes, or sorry, I'm not trying to push this, but
Push it.
her posture where she's standing kind of over him kind of tells you she lays down the law. She's so badass, and you go in expecting, I think you could go in expecting that kind of heroine. So I think the covers are amazing and it tells the story of the book. Yeah.
I also really, I mean, again, just to reiterate what everybody's saying, I love illustrated covers. I love clinch covers with the abs and the half naked dudes. I love that. I also think it's really nice, especially illustrated covers. Like, I feel like for a while, you couldn't really find, or not you couldn't really find, but like as an author of color or an own voices author, it's illustrated covers are nice because you don't have to like wait to see if you find a stock photo or a model who looks like the minority character you're writing about. You can have the artist draw that. And I feel like that's been nice to see that as an option, because I feel like when I was growing up, I didn't see a lot of books, romance or not, with, or at least that were in my area, in my town, in my bookstores, in my library, where the characters on the cover were people of color. So I feel like illustrated covers have opened a door in that way for more diverse stories and characters, which I really appreciate.
I think also from a gateway to romance perspective, like I also love illustrated covers, but even if you don't like them, I think you have to acknowledge that it has made it easier for younger readers to feel comfortable picking up the books and sharing the books on social media. And I think we've seen like a rise in that, which I think is great because, yeah, I think the depictions of desire that we think about on like a traditional clinch cover, for example, like it can be super, super empowering, but it can also be intimidating for, I think, particularly for a younger reader who like just maybe isn't ready to like be carrying that around. So I think to just expand on the accessibility point, like not only is it allowing other people to see, more people to see themselves reflected, because most people aren't like the same kind of like model that we see over and over on covers, but I think it also can make people feel comfortable with different levels of steam.
I just wanted to follow up on what Sarah said about diversity, and I think Temporary Wife Temptation, my first Desire book, was the first to have an Asian American couple, where both the hero and the heroine were Asian American, and that meant a lot to me. But what I want to kind of segue into is that because of the pandemic and the shutdown, for my third cover, it's coming out in December, they couldn't do the photo shoot.
Oh, wow.
Right? So for the authors who had books releasing near those dates, like October, November, December, I think, were the months that were affected. But when you think about it, you could go back to other photo shoots and find photos that could work for many of the authors, because there are so many shoots that happened that involved Caucasian couples. But for me, they didn't have anywhere to go to find two Asian American couples again. So it's kind of a dilemma. But they did an amazing job. I don't want to spoil it, but they did some, I don't know, Photoshop magic. We can't figure out how they did it, but they have managed to get two Asian and an Asian couple on the cover. But I just thought about it a lot. The fact that the only way they could get another Asian couple was to go back to my first book. So that was the only option. But I'm hoping that would all change. You know, first step, baby steps.
Yeah, it's like one thing I'm not worried about as someone who gets illustrated covers at this point is that, you know, I'm like, okay, they can still do my cover. Like, you know, I think everyone's worried about everything, you know, and hopefully the clinches can recommence soon.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're just all going to be masked now.
Yeah, which,
standing
you know,
6 feet apart.
Right, which does come, you know, and this idea of, right, I think we've had some conversations on Twitter about it, of how to approach writing. So I'm drafting 2 things right now that's going to be published in 2021. And like, how do I, you know, it's one of these things where you, as you're drafting, you're like, okay, how do I address this? You know, and do you, or do you not? Is it appropriate? Do you say something small that COVID-19 happened? You know what I mean? So I have a women's fiction coming out in April of 2021. And I did mention COVID-19. So it's 3 best friends that get together, and they haven't seen each other in 10 years. And 2 of the 3 are not left in such a bad way. And when they see each other on that day, they come together like, oh my gosh, what are you doing here? And one of them says, well, I'm going to leave. And the other one says, no, don't leave. So much has happened. And then she mentions COVID-19, right? We have lost people, we have whatever. So don't leave now, you know? So that was like my only like one line that mentions that we're going through a pandemic. And my copy editor at the time highlighted and said, this is the first 2021 book that she's read thus far that have mentioned COVID-19. So it got me to thinking like, wow, how about for the late 2021 books that are coming
I'm
out?
ignoring it. I can't,
Yeah.
I'm writing my book to escape.
Yeah.
I'm pretending it never happens. For now. we'll see if that continues to work. But yeah. I don't want to think about it.
Yeah, same. I mean, that's the thing. Like, and I did see an industry person on Twitter mention something like, you know, you should kind of mention it. That was her opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, everybody is going to have their opinion and everybody's going to do what they want to for their book. But it's something to think about, you know?
Yeah, I'm working on a book that's coming out early 2022 right now.
Okay.
And so, like, yeah. I don't think I'm going to mention it.
Yeah.
I don't directly mention it, but I've been told to be considerate of the sensitivities that people have. So I wrote a scene about a crowded theater. Mm-hmm. So then my editor commented, maybe people don't want to think that. It'll be just like danger alert, you know, and
it's just too obvious. Oh, I see.
Yeah. So I took out the crowded part and changed it to like, you know, something different so that it won't be like people won't be hit with the visceral reaction, like crowded movie theater, holy crap. So I've had to do that. So COVID definitely is impacting some of our writing, because we have to consider the readers.
Yeah. And I think like Rosie said, a lot of people are adding some like sort of like I've seen like mention of a lot of like witch books. So like I think witches are going to be big.
Vampires back too.
Yeah, I think I've seen mentions of announcements from publishers of some witch books, and I'm like, yeah, so witches are coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Right on.
I love witches.
Yep.
Me too, like practical magic, so good.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yes.
It's always cool to see how trends reflect like current events or like cultural moments in real life. Like, again, I think actually at least for me personally, this is when I started noticing the witches trend, because the witches trend, I think, hit in culture, or like, for me, it was like around 2016, because I was like, I need to deal with this. I need to like feel like I can have some like way to battle this evil, basically. And I got a bunch of crystals and was just like, I'm just gonna straight up start casting spells on people. And I think that there was like a whole movement of like witchiness in pop culture, and now that's manifesting in romance, and I'm super excited about it, because I think I don't know, I've missed paranormal. Like, I love Presley Cole. I've been rereading a lot of Presley Cole in quarantine. So I'm totally here for all of these like new reinventions. And I think one of the great things about some of the announcements that I've been seeing is we are getting like more own voices, interpretations on paranormal trends. So that's really exciting, like seeing, you know, different groups that maybe haven't been as represented in paranormal historically telling stories. So that's cool.
Yeah, I'm really excited for Teresa, but I'm going to butcher her last name, Teresa Bahari's witch book.
Yeah, and I see Nick just mentioned Salika's books. She's got 3, I think, with like shifters, it seems like, and stuff. So I think that'll be really cool.
My paranormal whip has a Korean American fox spirit. The fox spirit immigrated to America.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love that.
So Yeah, I write about Asian Americans because we don't get enough, I think, insight into the culture and I guess really the similarities of how Asian Americans are Americans too.
Mhm.
We're so often viewed as
Yes.
foreigners, right? The constant, where are you from? Where are you really from, right?
That's right.
It's like, I don't
I hear
really
that.
live in California. I'm from Mars, right? Um, so that's why even for paranormal, I had her come to the US and she's been living here 100 years.
I love it. Because there is that nuance, there is that true nuance. Sort of like how Edward is how many years old and he's from, I don't remember now his origin story. I haven't started
I
reading.
just remember
If you haven't
he
picked up
experienced the
I have
Spanish
picked
flu.
it.
Right. Yes. He
Yes, that's
survived,
right.
Yeah. The Spanish. So
Oh
was
my
that,
gosh. Yeah. Oh, shoot. No mask wearing people. We're not
I bet he
gonna do
didn't wear a mask
I know.
because
Yeah.
he's immune to it.
Well, now.
Yeah.
Oh, but he could be out in sunlight if he wears a mask. It won't be so noticeable how sparkly he is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like it.
Mhm.
I have another question from the audience. How do you balance comedy and drama within a romance story? And do you worry about one overloading the other?
I have a theory of rom-coms that the most effective ones have like a kernel of darkness inside to balance out the humor. Like, because if you read something that's just utter slapstick from page to page, it doesn't feel grounded and real. So I always try to add and I always think like really funny people are often very dark on the inside. So I try to add a good amount of like humanity and some angst to a rom-com. And I also try to do the opposite. So if I'm writing something darker and angstier, I also try to add a good amount of levity and humor at the right moments just to balance it out. But like the balance is going to be different depending on what you're writing.
Yeah, I definitely think they're like, for me personally, I like a blend. Like I come from a Nora Ephron school of romance in the sense that like those moments of sadness just add to the enjoyment of the rest of the story, like allow you to better reflect in the moments of happiness. And I think there often like is humor in darkness. Like there's often things like that. So it's interesting to me. I know like some people feel uncomfortable with like books being marketed as rom-coms that then potentially explore darker themes. And I think, there's obviously a lot of importance to make it clear for readers, like with content warnings, if it is going to go into a place like that. But I certainly think like hopefully there's room within romantic comedy as a genre to just have a more holistic view of life, right? And that like life isn't like can have really high highs of hilarity, but at the same time can have, and it doesn't have to be devastating. I think like sometimes the notes that we hit are like bittersweet, and that still adds a lot of complexity. Like I think of romance almost like a well-balanced dish, you know what I mean? Like you don't want to just have it come across sweet on the palate or spicy or whatever. It's like better when it's both. So yeah, I think that's the beauty of it, is can you play those notes off one another so that they add to each other and it becomes delicious.
Yeah, I think it's about showing a depth of character, right? They're funny, lighthearted, and they could be elated, but they could also be devastated. Humans don't have like a steady, like flat line of emotions. Either you're a happy person, you're a sad person. No, we travel all the ranges of emotion. And I think it's realistic to include characters and have them feel everything to like to the depth of who they are, but still be funny. Yeah.
I like how you said that, Jayci, like you say like it's important to recognize that like as a human you aren't one-dimensional, you go through all of these emotions at various points. And I feel like it just reminded me of, so my book that's coming out in October, Simmer Down, the main character, her dad has died, so it's just her and her mom, and they're trying to run this food truck business together. And I mean, like, that's an objectively thing to have happen, like one of your parents is dead, but her mom has like an urn of her dad's ashes, and every time like the main character, her daughter does something frustrating, she just like yells at the urns like, see, this is what your daughter's doing, like so that's like not like that, obviously that's really sad, that person's dead, but in that moment it's kind of funny because she's yelling at this urn who's not going to answer her. But I feel like Rosie, you were also saying like there are moments of levity and humor in dark moments sometimes. And I feel like that is a moment that could be like, I feel like that's a realistic moment that could happen to somebody. And I was trying to capture something like that in the context of a rom-com, and it's still a rom-com romance, like her romance with the guy who's parked next to her in the food truck trying to put her out of business. That's what's propelling the story. But yeah, it's just trying to find a balance of those funny moments and those other moments. But I think you can do it because that's what life is. Life is just a crazy balance of all these weird moments happening. Some of them suck and some of them are great and some of them are hilarious. And it's just how it is, just life, I guess.
Totally. Were there some non-book inspirations that helped with the structure of your books or served as fodder for ideas?
Well, I'm always looking at structure and like, you know, I'm always watching something new. So like, and I think everything I watch kind of inspires me. We were talking about like sort of the emotional range of romantic comedy. I think that's really well reflected in a lot of the television shows that I had been watching before I decided to try romantic comedy. So like You're the Worst, it's like a romantic comedy about terrible people. Like the meet cute is like she's stealing a food processor and he has just from a wedding, from the gifts, and he has just given a roast of the bride who's his ex-girlfriend, and they're outside smoking a cigarette together. Yeah, so I like that kind of thing. Like Catastrophe is one of my favorites. Like I love Lovesick. Like all of those sort of like funny romantic television shows really sort of inspire me.
Yeah, I love sitcoms, and I definitely was watching, I've talked about this, but like a lot of New Girl when I was writing The Roommate, because obviously it's the same kind of setup in terms of forced proximity and opposites attract. And like Nick is sort of on New Girl is like a kind of like slacker with a heart of gold, and my hero is kind of like that. Obviously there's not the whole adult entertainment industry subplot. That's all me. But yeah, I think that show, I thought like it was a different kind of hero, Nick Miller. You know, I think in romance too, we do have a tendency a little bit, and I'm glad we've come away from this and expanded beyond it a little bit. Not that it's terrible, but like there was always like the billion, you know, we had the big trend of the billionaire romance. And, you know, again, I kind of am sick of that personally. So I like seeing some of the underdog stories of characters that don't necessarily have like every resource at their disposal, and how do they make themselves in that way, I think has been kind of refreshing too.
I find myself like evaluating like everybody when it comes to structure of like trying to get a character right. And because I am more of like a character driven storyteller, I suppose. So I'm always looking at arcs or thinking about arcs. And when I hear somebody's story, I always say, when did things change for them? You know, like when was that inciting incident for them? And then what happens, 5 years later, what happened to them then? So like when I'm actually listening to stories, I'm actually trying to figure out, like what happened to you. You know how they always talk about the wound and how the wound happens before page 1. And so I'm always like trying to figure out like, what is this person's wound? I mean, it's probably really nosy, but I think it's because you're always thinking about how they're supposed to change, because just like we're our own characters, like we change in our lives. So like, how did they change?
Sorry, guys. The sun is setting and I'm fading into darkness. And my little ring light thing I got from Amazon is dying.
Oh no.
But I just wanted to add that as a young girl, I was reading Harlequin, but also watching every K-drama I could get my hands on. So I think that has influenced me, especially when writing Harlequin. It seems I had no idea I was doing it, but it seems like I write good slow burn romance. And I must get them from the K-dramas, because how long does it take? 13 episodes before they kiss? So I have that tendency to make the characters really wait for it. Oh, I just thought of Hamilton, sorry. But
I thought of it earlier when someone else said something else, so you're not alone. Let's see here. How do you balance unlikability in a character while keeping the reader's interest to discover the rest of the story? How far does the line go?
Oh my goodness.
Really good.
I try to make them really funny.
Yeah.
That they have their save the cat moments, they're probably super duper grumpy, but then they're so loyal, or
Right.
something.
Yeah, they're loyal. They're like a really good friends. They get the one good quality or two. And then the rest are just trash.
That's so funny. I do that too. It's like you can be a dick, but like you rescue cats, or you're like really sweet to your mom or something, and that like hopefully tides the reader over until like later on in the story when they start to more fully redeem themselves.
I feel like I also just try to like show, if it's a POV character, I feel like you have the opportunity to show the soft underbelly a little bit and explain like why they're behaving in the way that they are, and I think that can make them more empathetic as well. Like I feel like I have a personal soft spot for especially female characters who have like a very hard outer shell, and then you kind of like learn that they feel like they have to behave that way for a certain reason, and then it's like all the more interesting when they put the shield down, and I'm definitely interested in telling that kind of story.
Awesome. And then here's our penultimate question. Considering the pandemic, are there other examples of past historical events that affected your writing, and what lessons do they provide that could help mitigate or allay any long-term or short-term effects?
Wait, can you repeat that question again? That was like 40 words.
Here we go. Considering the pandemic, are there other examples of past historical events that affected your writing? And what lessons do they provide that could help mitigate or allay any long-term or short-term effects?
I will have to jump in to say, like, the Iraq War for me was huge. I'm a military spouse. So, deployment, the war that caused the deployment, really was, first of all, was my indoctrination into writing way in the beginning, and then into reading romance heavily. But to me, coming upon like another kind of, I guess, level of struggle is to try to see that there will be an end to it. You know, obviously we've been at war for a very long time, so we're not done yet. But I suppose that's why we write. That's why I write, is to paint that picture of its, or paint pictures of situations where it's probably not happening, just like what Andie said. You know, so that's, for me, that has always played into my drive to be a writer as well as a reader of romances, because it was a big deal, you know. So
yeah, I got nothing. This is like the worst thing that's happened since I started writing. Like, I got nothing. Like,
that was a good answer, Tif. Thank you for answering that.
Was really good.
Thank you, Tif.
Well, I'm just going to take a moment before the ultimate question to remind everyone to pick up. Oh, wait, we got to reach this one. Let's see here. Don't be shy. Pick up your new books from all of our wonderful panelists today. Faker, Simmer Down's coming out this fall. You can pre-order that from the link. Jayci Lee, her next two, you can pre-order at that link. You can pre-order the US release for The Roommates from Rosie. But one of my favorite bookseller questions, what are you reading?
I've been reading steamier books so far during quarantine. I find they're more distracting, and also I feel like the brand of staying inside your house and not seeing another human is thirst. So this week I'm reading The Doctor by Nikki Sloan, which is an indie. And then I'm really excited to start, and two that are available for pre-order that I've read since I've been inside, are one that I've read and one that I'm excited about is How to Fail at Flirting by Denise Williams. And that is available for pre-order. And then I'm reading this weekend The X Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon. So that's, I'm excited about those two. But yeah, other than that, it's that and super steamy stuff.
I find that in the last few weeks, I haven't been able to read a thing. I can't seem to concentrate, and I think it's just really hitting me, like going on to 5-6 months of really observing the social distancing, and it's, I don't know, it's hard I don't have the emotional capacity to read the books that I love, because romance and in all subgenres are so emotional, and I feel like, I can't do that right now. But I'm an avid reader of all kinds of romance, and I will get back to it.
I took a little vacation, very short, from romance, and I read an upcoming debut thriller that I really highly recommend. It's a feminist noir. It's by Haley Sutton, and the protagonist is a queer woman, and it's just like one of my favorite books that I've read of all time. It's so beautifully written. It takes like all the smoky, like LA sort of like noir feelings, and then just puts it into like a totally new narrative because of the POV characters. And it was really fun and cathartic to read. So I really recommend that. That comes out in November by Haley Sutton. And then I I'm also reading a couple arcs this weekend that I'm looking forward to. So I have Shipped by Andy Hockman, that is a debut coming out from Gallery about two people, and I believe they're trapped on a cruise ship, which feels timely. So I'm looking forward to diving into that one. And then I also have the X Talk by Rachel and Solomon, and I'm excited about that because I love Rachel's YA. So if you're a romance reader and you haven't heard of Rachel and Solomon, the X Talk comes out in January, but there is a lot of really great YA to dive into. And a lot of her stories center Jewish characters, which was really awesome. She just had one come out called Today, Tonight, and Tomorrow. And I think I said those three words in the right order, but maybe it's reversed. It's, I think, like 3:30 a.m. here now. So bear with me.
Yeah.
Pretty
I
sure
feel
that's
like I've been yawning, and it's not because I haven't been it's almost 11 o'clock here. And so I'm usually like in bed.
I have quite a few books going because I also listen on audio. So I just finished Beach Read by Emily Henry, which gave me the tears and I made me cry, which was perfect because you know how you just need to cry. Like I needed to cry, I guess. So I just finished that, and then I started The Perfect Escape by Suzanne Park, which is a YA. And I'm reading two books, one arc, Like Lovers Do, and that's Tracy Livesey. It's excellent. Like she's one of my most favorite writers.
I love her. I have that one. I need to
She's
get
just so well done. And I'm also reading The Cowboy's Claim, and that's Nina Crespo. And that's the Tilbridge series, and that's a Harlequin special edition, I believe. But that's also super, super good. So, yeah.
I'm reading an arc right now of Heart on a Leash by Alana Martin, and that's a really, really cute, like romance about two rival families in Alaska. One of them like loves sled dogs, and the other one are cat people, and they just live in this small town and just undercut each other. It's really cute. It's amazing, and I think it comes out in April, and I'm really loving it. It's steamy, but it's also sweet and funny, and yeah, it's great. Highly recommend. Pre-order it if you can. It's really good.
Did we get everybody? Jayci?
Yes, you got me saying I'm not reading anything at the
Because you're writing down titles. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for extending your evening, especially Andie and Rosie, as we the world turns again. Thank you so much for joining us. If you love this event, do check out, first of all, on Saturday, Bookstore Romance Day. There's a whole day of virtual programming. You can hang out with Meg Cabot. You can hang out with cowboys and YA and all sorts of subgenres. So I highly encourage everyone to check that out. And there are more events coming from Books in Common Northwest. So check out booksincommonnw.com to find out next week's event. Spoiler alert, it's Jeff Vandermeer and Kathryn Valenti. So if you're in that paranormal fan group, you might want to check out some weird science fiction and fantasy with those two. Thank you all so much for joining us. Quiet applause. Thank you. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, you
Bye,
guys.
ladies.
Bye.
Bye.